Hello, I'm David Heyman, and I play Brace on the TV show Taboo. And you're listening to the Shat on TV podcast with Roger, Gene, and Big D.
Welcome back to Shat on TV Taboo Edition, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit FX and BBC One series Taboo. I am one of your hosts, Roger Roper, also known as The Rog, and alongside me is one of my co-hosts, Big D Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And this is our fan email episode where we look back on this week's episode of Taboo and provide our feedback on the top listener emails of the week. This was episode 5, Big D. We got some great email and listener feedback.
I've noticed lately, not even talking about the show, you've become quite silky smooth in the beginning of the...
Oh, really? Thank you.
I wasn't sure if you're trying to set the mood now for, hey, welcome back to Taboo.
Well, kinda, because number one, we got some listener feedback that was like, hey, can Roger take a fucking Valium or something, calm him down a little bit? Plus, like, I think it sets the mood, like our theme music for Taboo, it's very ominous. So to go from that to like, hey, I'm wacky Roger Roper, thanks, morning zoo shit, like, I can't do that, so thank you.
I think you're trying to make it an erotic podcast.
I sure am. So one goes out to all the ladies and the fellas. I mean, whatever. Doesn't matter to me. But yeah, so if you haven't ever listened to our River Rants episode, basically the format of the show is we read and respond to top emails from our listeners and fans of the show and respond to them. You can do that if you want to be part of the conversation. If you want to join River Rants, our email address is hosts@shatontv.com. Some of the emails, we don't read the entire email. We have to truncate it for time, but you can go to our website, shatontv.com, navigate to Taboo River Rants, and you can see the entire emails there. I've already posted them. So if you're listening to this in real time, you can actually go to the website there and do that. There's a comment section that you can join the conversation. So that's how we do this. We do our deep dive episodes of Taboo that's released every Tuesday, or mostly every Tuesday. It's been Wednesday last couple of weeks, but that's what we do here at Taboo FX. Before we begin, Big D, anything you want to talk about?
Yes, if you are one of our listeners on YouTube, and we do have a pretty big community for all the podcasts that listen to us via YouTube, we've gotten some complaints because we're a little bit later on that. To get onto YouTube's an additional step, and normally we'll do it a couple hours later, so our YouTube listeners have been feeling cheated. So we're going to change up the way we do it. We're actually going to feed it directly from Libsyn, so we should be quicker to post on YouTube, starting with this one tomorrow. So we apologize, and we just want to keep you guys happy.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that being said, Big D, play the Taboo River Rants. Don't we have a thing?
You have to say.
We have a theme music.
Yes, but you say, hey, with that Big D, take us to the river.
Oh. No, with that Big D.
No, fuck you. Stop doing that voice.
No, I'm going to do that from now on.
No,
with
just
that,
do a normal voice.
So with that, Big D, take us to the river. Our first River Rant email comes in from Boppin' Bobby Swiss. He writes in, hey guys, do you recognize this guy in episode 4? That hooded cloak is unmistakable, and the comment about the treachery surrounding him foreshadows this ominous stranger, and we had a flash glance at him in episode 3. This long-haired individual outside Delaney's window is also suspicious. There are no words, but it's dark, and he seems to be pointing at James when he first looks out. I'm straining to see who it is, but the light color hair reminds me of Helga, or more likely the old man from the farm looking after Delaney's kid. Just weird that he's out there. Is he just watching? Warning? Is that a black rabbit next to him on the floor? Who the hell is this? Thanks again for your efforts. Keep them coming. And so he attached this photo, Big D, that I posted here. Can you see this? Can you...
Okay, first of all, I like that people are going slightly insane. Yes, it is clear that the assassin was on the docks, that we'd seen him in episode 3. He's there, he's lurking around, he's gathering information. But the other one is from out the window. It looks like somebody with a hat on, like a cowboy hat. and on the ground is maybe a rooster or chicken. It is so blurry and distant. It could be almost anyone.
Yeah, I don't know who it is. And Taboo is one of those shows where we said from the outset, from the beginning, we're going to need audience participation to help us and break this down. These are things that I did not notice whatsoever. We've posted it on our website. If you can enlarge this or you know this scene, please write in and tell what this is, because Bop and Bobby Swiss need some help here.
I need to go watch the actual video, because this still makes it look like this person's quite happy. They are bebopping around.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but it was good to see that some of the characters that we're getting to know now or coming across have actually been following or have been, right around the edges of what James is doing in London. So I like that. It was a good catch. We didn't see it the first time.
Thanks so much for writing in, Bobby. The next River Rant email comes in from Jason. Jason writes, "Hey guys, been listening since the Westworld pod. I love it. Keep it up. I have a request for you or your listenership. An audio or video, if legal, supercut of every well-placed from James Delaney. For me, each one of these is superbly timed grunts that has the power of 100 words with Tom Hardy behind it. There will be dozens by then. What do you think? Cheers." And that comes from Jason S. in Guntersville, Alabama.
I think that would be funny to see, but a hell of a lot of work.
Yeah, that's what I said. I wrote back to him. I was like, listen, this is a fantastic idea. I love the idea. But the amount of time, listen, you have how old's your daughter now? She's almost 2.
Jesus, you're terrible. She's 14 months old.
Like, when do you stop counting months? When is it acceptable? You're not like when she's 2, right? You're not gonna be like she's 36 months.
No, like a year and a half. You probably stop.
Okay, all right. So
but
you're busy. You're busy with that. We have 2 other podcasts that we do, so it's difficult for us to find time to do stuff like this. But if you have the means necessary, maybe Marty from Great Northern Radio has the ability to do something like this. I think it would be perfect. I think it would be brilliant.
Yeah, you don't realize it unless you watch television with subtitles on. I've gotten into the habit with my wife having Portuguese be her native language that we always watch it, even though her English is fluent. And there's many times that you will pick up subtle, inaudible cues throughout shows. And with this show, Taboo, they make it clear, grunt. They actually will write out his inaudible or his animal noises, and so you don't realize how many times he does it until you have to see it actually in print. But it would be very interesting. Stop it.
Jason, thanks so much for writing. If you have a supercut of those grunts from Tom Hardy, please feel free to send that in, and we will post it everywhere on our social media. The next River Rant email comes in from Raj, all the way in Birmingham, United Kingdom. He writes in, "Hey guys, hope you are well. Quick email. While watching the duel in episode 5, I was struck by the similarities to the duel between Flashman versus Bernier in the novel Flashman by George MacDonald Fraser. I've read all the novels, thoroughly enjoyable. I won't go through them as I don't want to spoil the fun in the research. Please excuse the typos. Really entertaining and absorbing stuff. Big fan." That comes from Raj in Birmingham, United Kingdom. So Big D, now typically Gene is our literary expert here when it comes to answering these type of questions. So I just did a little bit of research here, and the Flashman Papers is a series of novels and short stories written by George MacDonald Fraser, the first of which was published all the way back in 1969. It centers on the exploits of Harry Flashman, who is a cowardly British soldier. And there is a duel that takes place in one of the stories. There's 11 novels and a collection of short stories, but there is a duel in one of them.
Yes, and the similarities that he's referencing is Harry Flashman actually has a duel with a fellow officer's lover, and he challenges him to the duel. And what he does is he actually pays off his opponent's number 2 to load a blank. So it's very similar to what we saw in Taboo. I wonder if this was more common than we think it is. But you would figure that if someone was shot and it
Right.
was a blank, or you wouldn't always assume it was a misfire. So I'm surprised, following the procedures and the protocol for a duel, if you had a misstep, if you either shot too early, if you tried to shoot a second time, you were open to being shot by the opponent's second. So this
Right.
seems like a risky move, but I do like the similarity to the book.
Yeah, Harry Flashman, he's a coward, right? He's the one that slept with, he had the affair with the other officer's wife, and that's why the reason for the duel. But listen, we talked about this on the deep dive, the hubris that Delaney has to just go out there with one pistol, not even a second, and he doesn't have anyone, supporting him. He could have easily died.
Yeah, and I'm still not sure if he is either reckless, careless, or a combination of both.
Yeah.
But he's lucky. He's lucky to be alive. There's multiple times that he could have been killed or should have been killed.
Right.
So I think anytime the lesson here is you're going to go into a duel, make sure you check your firearm yourself before you go in, and always have a trustworthy second.
Well, not only that, but like the pistols back then, they were known to misfire. They were known to, shoot, if you had a wet flint, it wouldn't light, right? So they were completely unreliable back then. Thanks, Raj, for writing in. The next River Rant email comes in from Claire. Claire wrote in a very nice, long email with a lot of thoughts here. We've truncated it to just this meaty portion. She says, sorry for the length of this. I just need to get it off my chest. Tom Hardy gave quite an interesting interview indicating that as the story unravels, the intention is that we go back and look at things which might have seemed inconsequential initially, but reveal more importance. He also referred to a turn-of-the-century play, Spring Awakenings, as the inspiration for the relationship between Delaney and Zilpha. The play is about two teenagers in a sexually repressed society experimenting with sex, with the girl getting accidentally pregnant. The boy is sent away as punishment. The girl dies in a botched abortion. The boy returns looking for her and wanting to raise the child with her, only to discover her demise. I think it's also significant that one of Tom Hardy's first outings on television in the UK was as Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights, another tale of a potentially incestuous relationship, the bastard brother returning seeking vengeance. And this comes from Claire in London.
Yeah, I hypothesized when we first saw James visit the cottage to pay off Horace's debt to the guardian of what we were told was James's half-brother. But now, looking at all the evidence, I think it's leaning more towards that Chun-Li's apprentice very well could be the child of James and Zilpha, and be a child of incest. And it would make sense that Zilpha's insistence and fear of James revealing the big truth is more than just of their sexual intimacy, because it seems like that secret's pretty much out there. But the existence of a bastard child of brother and sister, I don't think there is anything more taboo.
Let me ask you this. How far away do you have to be for it to be incestuous? Brother and sister, like that's number one. Like that's completely off the table. Half brother, half sister, probably still off the table, but not quite as bad as full brother, full sister, right?
Yeah,
like how
not.
far down do you have to go? Like, are we talking second cousin here, third cousin? What are we talking?
I think a bigger issue is if you were raised with them, if it is a distant relative that you didn't know, someone who you weren't raised with.
Sure.
I think then it becomes a gray area. So to me, I'm not hung up on actual relations. Was it direct brother, sister? I think it's more of how you were raised that kind of dictates how bad it is. But again, I wouldn't want to be part of any of it. And any time it happens willingly, it's strange, and it shows a dysfunctional break in the family unit. So I don't think any normal circumstances it would happen.
So basically you're using the Luke and Leia argument, right? Like they're brother and sister, they're twins. Luke was raised on Tatooine. Leia was raised on Alderaan. They were not... they did not spend their childhood together. They have no idea that they are brother and sister, but yet she plants a sloppy, wet kiss on him in Empire Strikes Back. You're okay with that?
Yeah, of course. If you don't know it, And also,
But once you know it, it's gross.
yes, once you know
Okay,
it.
got it.
Yeah, but there's no excuse. If you were in a rural area where family, and we know that in early history that some of the monarchies actually
All
happened quite frequently, but that was to keep the gene pool and the line pure. There's no excuse for it. In London, even at this time, you have plenty of options.
Well, I mean, listen,
don't go hunting for a mate in your own home.
which is always funny to me, right? When you think about the royals and like wanting to keep the bloodlines pure, how could they possibly think that the bloodlines were pure when some of the outcomes were like the Prince Regent, where he's like just embattled with gout and just like all gross, and there were royals that like came out with like half an arm. You know what I mean? Like, wouldn't you say like maybe we should throw in some extra DNA in here?
I always think it's good to try to expand the gene pool.
Yeah, always. Yeah. Yeah. By the way, because I'm a huge dog lover, never buy a purebred. Purebred dogs will always have the highest number of medical issues. You want, you want a mixture of DNA and therefore a healthy dog. I've got 2 mutts. They're perfectly healthy. They're the best things in the world. In terms of your email, Claire, I think you're right. And we've actually received a couple emails about the Wuthering Heights and Heathcliff. So maybe Tom Hardy just likes these kind of roles. I don't know. He keeps going back to it. Maybe this is his second time playing an incestuous brother. Thank you so much, Claire. Our next River Rant email comes in from Nico. He writes in, "Hello, gentlemen. Last week I wrote in about my theory about James either being possessed by a Wendigo or, what I believe to be more likely, he has simply become one himself. I won't completely rehash everything I put in that email, but this week I offer up some proof. I'm betting on the twist at the end of the season is that James died on the boat with the other 200 or so slaves and was brought back to life via a very dark sort of magic, which would be an alternate reason why he'd be a Wendigo. Attached to this email is a screen grab from episode 2, and I've raised the brightness as much as I can. You can see very clearly that James's teeth are indeed fangs. Now, I know we've joked about that James could be a vampire, but I really do think that being a Wendigo is far more likely. I'm very interested to see what everyone thinks. As always, thank you for your time, Nico." And again, we've posted this photo on Chat on TV. I was not part of River Rant, so I did not... I was not part of that conversation last week, Big D, between you and Gene. What did you guys say about this whole Wendigo theory? First of all, what is a Wendigo?
The Wendigo is a cannibal monster or evil spirit native to the northern forests of the Atlantic coast and the Great Lake region of the United States and Canada. If you ever see some pictures of them, they are sometimes portrayed as emaciated creatures. They're not always human. It's described as, skin pulled tightly over bones. But I think also a Wendigo can be a form of possession.
Yeah, so the Wendigo was like basically a way to like explain spirits or inhabitants or like demonic possession. I don't believe that James died per se, but like we have seen those flashbacks, right? Of some sort of voodoo ritual over James. I mean, we assume that's James on his back, right? And someone kind of waking him up. So, I mean, it's possible. I mean, shoot, we see a telekinetic connection with Zilpha, and you see Zilpha talking to James at the end. So, I mean, this demonic possession could make sense.
Well, also, if it was truly a Wendigo, why do you need James as a true vessel? In Algonquin lore, it's a beast. It's not hiding within a villager necessarily and manipulating human situations. I don't see a Wendigo going into the East India and playing little word games with Sir Strange. I picture a Wendigo breaking in the EIC at night and just ripping out his throat. So
yeah, and even though Wendigos are supposedly cannibalistic, we haven't seen James, like when he ripped off that throat or whatever of the thief in episode 1 or episode 2, I can't remember. He spit it out immediately. It's not like he ate the flesh right away. So I mean, it's a stretch, but it could be. We'll see. I mean, there's 3 episodes left. So they've got to somehow explore those scenes in Africa, and they've got to explore the ship. I do believe that he went down with the ship out of the coast of Africa. I do believe that happened, and I do believe it was under the tutelage of Sir Strange.
And I just think it's a bit odd that we haven't seen any more of those flashbacks where James is actually having conversations with what we believe are dead slaves from that ship, as he did when he first went to visit Horace's body. And he had that vivid encounter with that gigantic slave.
Yeah.
I was expecting that to be more of a frequent occurrence. Mm-hmm. So that's leading me, since it was just a one-time deal, I'm leaning towards a normal human explanation.
Sure.
But in the end, if this turns out to be that, I think most people would be disappointed.
Nico, thank you so much for writing in. The next River Rant email comes from Brian in Garden Grove, California. He writes in, hey guys, thanks so much for this podcast. Quick question on the East India Stuart Strange. Is he a serial pederast? It would explain a lot with regard to many aspects of the revealed plot. Examples: James's instant plunge from exemplary, perfect student to murderously subordinate, disrespectful, and obviously lingering hatred of the EIC. Could he possibly have been triggered by molestation? Secondly, James' comments on their meeting, harder to remember, those you look down upon, etc. And thirdly, Goddard's, perhaps he's one who didn't mind it, got rewarded with a desk job in London.
Yeah, I don't believe that is the motivation for James. James seems fairly comfortable with most forms of sexual, I don't want to say deviance, but I mean, we see he's in love with his sister. So I don't think he was shaped, or his anger is directed at someone who had violated him sexually.
Right.
I think his anger generates from a larger wrong that was being done, not just to him. There's no other mention of pedophilia. I think it has to be the East India. The church has had a problem with obviously this same issue.
Exactly.
It would make sense if this was true, that James was abused, that Sir Strange was doing it on a large scale, and the East India chose to cover it up. Yes, I could see that James would be motivated to bring down the entire organization that shielded the cause of James's pain. But simply because Goddard's is gay, it's wrong to think that he didn't mind it, accepted it, or was okay with it, or could be okay with it.
And again, you've talked about it, and there's, I've watched documentaries on it, and and I'm not a psychiatrist, or I don't pretend to be one here, but from what I understand, victims feel, and I think that's what Brian's trying to say here, is there's a lot of victimhood and like you said, they shame themselves, and it's not like he didn't mind it, even though Goddard's might be gay. There's a feeling of when someone above you that you want to please. I mean, we see this in the child soldiers of Africa, right, with the sexual abuse there by their superiors, by old men who are leading them into these battles. They sexually abuse them as a means to keep them in line. Does that make sense? And then you almost develop Stockholm syndrome, where you want to keep doing these things to please them because you get rewarded, and otherwise, if you don't, you get shamed. It's a terrifying thing to be in. So, I mean, I could see that someone like James would rebel back and start beating the shit out of other officers, and then because that would make me want to take down something like this, the EIC, right?
Yeah, but let's go back to his first conversation with the East India. Sure. He says, I know the evil that the East India does because I was once part of it.
Sure.
He would not consider himself part of it, because I don't believe that James would turn around and be an abuser. So saying I was once part of it shows that James was complicit in whatever wrong things the East India was doing.
You could take it that way. I mean, if by your logic, and listen, believe me, I think I'm on your side here. The fact that when he says that, he's referring to slavery. I think that's what it is. Yes. But per Brian's point, when James says to Sir Strange, he's like, it's harder to remember those you look down upon. The fact that he said, I was complicit in it, could be something where like, he sees or he allows this pedophilia to happen. And then doesn't say anything until it's too late, until his friend Goddard, who he shared beds with, is abused and, it continues to this day. Right. So, I mean, it could be. It's a stretch, Brian, to be honest.
Remember, Sir Strange looks down at everyone, even members of his own office.
Right. Personally, Brian, if you want our opinion, I think it's more to do with the slavery than it does with any sexual childhood abuse. But thank you so much for writing in. The next River Rant email comes in from Jeff H. Jeff H. writes in, hey, if gunpowder is introduced into Act 1, it must go off by Act 3. Big D said in your last deep dive that Delaney is producing the gunpowder for trade or as a bargaining chip. I think that the evidence we have at the moment supports that as of episode 5, James has no intention of using that gunpowder in battle or in an attack. I'm calling it now, though. Things will change. Plans will change. We're going to see an explosion. Boom. Boom. That comes from Jeff H.
Totally agree with him. So in the last River Rant, I mentioned that I believed he doesn't have enough gunpowder to trade. He's using it as a bargaining chip. So then I started thinking, okay, he's used the theft of the saltpeter to pit the Crown and the East India against each other. So I was like, okay, how else? Now the Americans are getting roped in. They need gunpowder to break the blockade in Ireland. So I started Googling blockade explosions, 1800s, bombings, London, 1800s. And I am on the same line that I believe Jeff is, that it would be a perfect ending where James uses Chekov's gunpowder as an act of blowing up possibly some component of the Crown, maybe attempting, make it look like the East India is trying to take out either the Prince Regent or part of the royal family. That would spark the final step that would have the Crown come down hard, believing it was the East India or the Americans,
right,
and have them destroy each other, which I believe would be James's end goal.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that sounds good to me. I wrote back and I said, listen, I want to see the boom. I want to see some action, Jeff. But like Gene said in our deep dive this week, like it'd be nice to see some of these puzzle pieces starting to tighten up and fall into place before that final, because you don't want to like go in there in final 30 minutes where they're trying to shove everything in to try and bridge the story. Like you want it to feel natural, so to speak. So if they bring the explosions, if things go boom, I'd like to see it maybe before the finale, right? Thank you so much, Jeff H., for writing in. Next River Rant email comes in from Bill. Bill writes, hello, gentlemen. Firstly, gypsy. I don't think that you should feel too bad about using the term gyp. I know that topic is moot and people tend to fall on the side of PC, but one thought is that gypsy refers to a behavior more than any nationality. It is a term attributed to more or less an honest person than a person of a specific geography. There are Irish gypsies and even American gypsies. See the Riches TV show. Not all Roma are gypsies. I know and believe this in my heart. I would go so far as to say almost everyone except the people currently living in the geography from whence the Roma originated share the sentiment. Secondly, beads. I think the suggestion James has bought souls with beads may simply be a generalization of how men win the hearts of women with baubles and gems. Has he never given a woman a gem to win her heart? The diamond he gave Zilpha, for example. Thirdly, gunpowder. I think that maybe the terms of the treaty are not fulfilled until the gunpowder is delivered, so James may be trying to remove any challenge to the validity of the treaty by fulfilling that last term. Those are my 3 pence, or my points. Loving it, gents, and that comes from Bill in Toronto. So basically he's talking about, so I use the word gyp like flippantly, and Gene, does not like me to use that term. So that's where his first point comes from. We talked about beads and gunpowder. Big D, your thoughts?
Well, I don't think that you were using the term gypsy to identify a race or a specific group of people. It references a member of a traveling people traditionally that live and move. So I don't think you meant it that way. But to go into the baubles and the gunpowder, as we just mentioned in the email before, I believe this gunpowder is not leaving London. It has a purpose there. But with the beads, I think it's a metaphor for buying something of value or something that's invaluable with trinkets.
Sure.
James's father purchased a living human being for things that were unimportant.
Yeah. No, I could see that because, I mean, that truly happened in the slave trade, right? They would use the different tribes. They would go and pay one tribe certain amounts of money to then go and enslave other people to get more trinkets or things of value from the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Dutch, the English. I mean, that's how the slave trades worked, the Americans. So, I mean, I could totally see what Lorna said in terms of you never bought someone with beads could relate to the slave trade. It could also mean that when James is going around, I mean, you see him with the bag of diamonds that he digs up in, episode 2, when he's going around buying people to be on Team Delaney, he's basically giving them diamonds. So he's literally buying people with beads.
Well, you also have to remember that what is valuable to someone differs culture to culture.
Right.
But the gunpowder is the one thing I just want to go back to. If James were to use the gunpowder as a final step to complete the treaty with the Nunca tribe, that would mean that James right now is not the legal title holder of that piece of land.
Is Bill asking the question that the gunpowder, does it have to be used to complete that treaty? Or I thought with already the signed treaty, like you're good. Like there's a contract already in place.
Yeah, what he's saying is that they signed the contract, but the terms of the contract were not completed. So you go buy yourself a brand new car, you sign on the dotted line, but you don't make the payments.
I don't see this contract being null and void because he has to complete it with the gunpowder. I think, honestly, I'm on the side of you. I think that he's going to use the gunpowder for something else. It's leverage with the Americans. It's, and it could be possibly that he wants to make things go boom. Thank you so much for writing in. The next River Rant email comes in from David O. David writes, "Hey guys, love your podcast. Been listening since Westworld and decided to jump on the Taboo train, largely because y'all are covering it. At the time of this writing, the most recent River Rants episode has already come out, so it's possible that this theory will be obsolete and answered in the next episode, so apologies if that is the case. Anyway, I don't think that the Countess Musgrove is actually Carlsbad. When they are in the magic trick, James tells the Countess, 'I think I know who you are,' emphasis on think. The Countess gives James a puzzled look, and it really looks like she is about to shake her head and say no, but she is interrupted by the magic trick. The next time that they speak, she ignores James's assertion. I might have done a poor job explaining that, but if you go back and watch that scene under the pretense that the Countess is not Carlsbad, I think you will understand what I am seeing. So who is Carlsbad then? I'm not sure, but Lorna seems like the only other option. Anyway, keep up the good work. I'm looking forward to the next episode." That comes from David.
Yeah, so we discussed that more than the magic trick was the Countess Musgrove's response to James mentioning that the Americans need gunpowder and that he knows that. That comes as news to the Countess. And it wasn't that she was playing coy. She seemed to actually not know, and she was honestly caught off guard. So I believe the Countess Musgrove is a decoy for Carlsbad. And that raises the question of who is Carlsbad. Lorna does have quite a bit of knowledge that she normally wouldn't have if you want to think she was just a normal actress. How did she come across Horace Delaney? Her documentation from Ireland is conveniently verified. She seems to know a lot. She seems to position herself always in the right place. And it would make sense that if James had willed this piece of land to the Americans, that having Lorna in close proximity to James to keep an eye on him and to make sure that he isn't going to try to unload it before he dies would make Lorna a likely possibility.
Has Dumbarton mentioned anything Americans working together with the Irish?
Well, yeah, I think he needs the gunpowder to help them break the blockade.
Right. So we know that Lorna spent a significant amount of time in Ireland.
Yes, and then also doing some historical research, I found out that the main center of relations between the United States and Ireland at this time took place in London.
Oh,
so
wow.
It would make sense that both players were in that small area geographically.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it is very likely. I was an early adopter of this Lorna is Carl's bad idea, and it might be coming back true. I kind of abandoned ship, but maybe I'm swimming back to it.
But I mean, wouldn't you be disappointed if it turned out in episode 8 or 9, we found out that Carlsbad was just some other character who we had yet seen?
I wouldn't be disappointed because it wouldn't be the first time that I was wrong. So, you never know. You never know. But I think there's signs pointing to the Countess is not Carlsbad and could indeed be Lorna Bowe. So thank you so much for writing in. The last River Rant email comes from Stefano. He writes in, "Good day. I keep pestering you with questions and theories. This time it's Thorne. He obviously is connected in some way to the dealings of the East India Trading Company and their planned acquisition of Nootka Sound. We know that he asked Atticus to have Horace Delaney killed in episode 2. He was obviously expecting something from the inheritance, again in episode 2, and had already reached an agreement with the EIC, driving a particularly hard bargain as mentioned in episode 1. He, while being a terrible and flawed person, is clearly suffering from an inferiority complex towards James, possibly reinforced by the fact that he is not apparently able to have a child with Zilpha, while James did. His beta status is confirmed by the fact that James does not kill him during the duel and also uncovers the fact that he is simply an expendable asset to the company. In this sense, his beating Zilpha is a way for him to get back at James, as well as the exorcism can be a last attempt to get the James's influence and power over his life. The sudden realization of his condition could, however, also bring him towards James, to get back at the EIC and maybe simply to feel like an active player rather than a passive subject. He could provide very valuable support and information to James's cause, and I don't think that James, who has been very open and out front in affirming that everybody he keeps around him serves him a purpose, would be above striking some kind of deal with him. That is, if Zilpha does not kill him beforehand. Have a good one, and keep up the good work, Stefano." It's a pretty interesting idea, Big D.
As far as being a chess piece on the board, he's off the board. Nobody's using him. He has limited power of influence, and I don't believe that he is still viable other than, his, and that's partially why he's really exuding power and being abusive to Zilpha. That's right. His last vestibule of power.
Sure.
Is he knows that James has affinity for his sister. She has it in return. And that compounded with the fact that they can't bear children has to be driving him truly insane. And we see him becoming wilder and wilder. And he wants to take out every piece of his anger on the only thing that he knows James cares about. And whether it's physically beating her or referencing the abuse vocally to James, he'll try whatever he can do.
Yeah, but I mean, think about it. I mean, I posed this question during our deep dive episode of why didn't he kill Thorne if, he was of no use to him, right? I mean, he knows that Thorne is beating Zilpha. He knows that he's a beta. But I mean, why keep him around unless James is using him for his purpose, for his selfish reasons?
Well, that's a possibility. But I found one interesting line that actually Stefano wrote, that the inability of Thorne and Zilpha to have a child while James did, ? He put in there. So he is also in the camp of believing what we just mentioned earlier was that possibly the little farm boy is not James's half brother, but actually their child.
Yeah, it's definitely their son. Definitely, 100%.
And you have to believe that Thorne would kill that child if he knew the truth.
Do you think so?
Of course.
No.
Thorne is all about protecting his legacy and protecting his lineage.
Sure.
Any wealth Thorne and Zilpha amass together,
right,
that child would be the rightful descendant and heir of that.
All right. I'm gonna make a terrible analogy here, or comparison, rather. Do you remember the Commodore in Pirates of the Caribbean? The Commodore who was going to marry Keira Knightley?
No, I really don't remember any.
You don't remember this? Okay, so in the Pirates of the Caribbean, the first movie, there's the Commodore that's introduced by the governor, and he's like high up there with the I think it's the EIC, right? The EIC at the time, or maybe the British Crown. Anyway, he's like the main antagonist in the first movie. Captain Jack Sparrow defeats him, And then he's kind of like pushed out of the company or pushed out of the crown, and they find him in the next movie in Dead Man's Chest. He becomes like an ally. They recruit him. Could Thorne be turned? Could he turn from jerk to, you know, someone of good? Or do you think that all the nasty stuff that he's doing to Zilpha, like, you know, the forced sex and then the groping by, you know, the preacher, do you think that that's just an irredeemable, like the audience could never accept someone who did something like that?
Okay, while you were saying that, I was chuckling to myself. And I was laughing at the fact that you thought that he could be redeemed.
Sure.
But I got to be honest, I had a little flashback come to my head. And I remember watching Game of Thrones and thinking that Jaime Lannister was the most reprehensible. I mean, for God's sake, he threw a child, spoiler alert, out of a castle window, paralyzing him because he was afraid of people finding out that he was having sex with his sister.
Sure.
It really doesn't get much worse than that.
Oh, it does. It does. It gets worse in future seasons.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm saying that
he rapes.
I know he rapes his sister.
Yeah, he rapes his sister
at the memorial
room. In the throne room, and the memorial for like their son. So I mean,
but what
it gets
I'm saying,
worse.
Hold on. What I was going to say is, in later seasons, even after that, he does have a redeeming arc where there is a large portion of the fan base that is pulling for Jaime Lannister now, where he's in a position to actually possibly play a heroic role.
Sure.
If he can be redeemed, anyone can be redeemed. Now, I don't think it's really... I mean, we're believing that this is a redemption story for James. Sure. That James was a slaver. He possibly has done things that are much worse than Thorne.
Sure. No, I get that. But listen, Game of Thrones is kind of a... It's masterful in that when we talk about it and you say it out loud, it seems absolutely like if you were trying to describe someone who's never seen Game of Thrones, never heard the book or read the book or understood the world that exists of Game of Thrones, and you were like, oh, by the way, I really love this character. He threw a kid out the window. He rapes his twin sister. They have 3 kids together. You'd be like, what? Why would I ever want to watch this?
He also kills his own cousin.
Oh, yeah, he also kills his own cousin. Captivity. Right, yeah. He backstabbed the king. You know, he's the Kingslayer. So, I mean, listen, I don't know if Thorne can come back, but listen, like you said, it's happened before. But I do believe what Stefano was saying. Otherwise, James would have killed him in the duel.
And also, with Game of Thrones, it took 7 seasons.
Right.
For him to do that. There's no way you can redeem Thorne and the way he has treated Zilpha in 2 episodes. You would need season 5 of Taboo.
That's right. And they're only going to season 3 so far, right? Like, that's what they said. They have 3
That's
seasons.
a rumor.
Right now. That's a rumor. Anyway, that does it for this week's River Rants episode. Big D, is there anything that you want to mention before we shut stuff down and get ready for Tuesday's deep dive episode?
Nope. Just shut it down.
All right. That concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV Taboo River Rants Edition. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere on social media, including Snapchat, Twitter, and Instagram. That handle is Shat on TV. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search for Shat on TV Podcast. Our email address is shatontv.com. Our email is hosts@shatontv.com if you want to be part of the River Rants email episode. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That really helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts Big D and Gene Lyons, I'm the Rog. Be sure to follow us individually on Twitter. Our individual bios are on the Shat on TV Twitter page. You can just follow there. So that does it. We'll see you on Tuesday. Thanks for listening.